Good afternoon, Corky here. Um, Wanted to talk about why I became a Pentecostal. And, you read a lot of things on Facebook and the internet and so forth. Um, and people have their theories, their beliefs about why things are the way they are and so forth like that. But I wanted to just give a personal testimony, kind of help people understand why I became a Pentecostal. Um, Here in the American South, it's heavily dominated by Baptist, Methodist, uh, Episcopal, Roman Catholic, Pentecostal, Charismatic, so many others. And I was raised Southern Baptist. I like to say, as was everyone else in the history of the world, because if you grew up in the 60s in Southern United States and you weren't Baptist, you might not be paying attention. Billy Graham was such a huge influence here in the South, and his methodologies and the things he would say, and more importantly, his identity, and still a great influence here in the Southern United States. I was raised Southern Baptist. As a young boy, I was taken to church in North Carolina, and we, sang the hymns. The preacher preached, sometimes in a white suit. Sometimes he had what I call two-tone perforated shoes, which I have preached in those. And we would go to church, but salvation was a thing, and Christianity was a thing for the Baptists, that you walk down front, sit on the front pew while the secretary fills out a card, and you hug the preacher's neck, and maybe he'll get you to pray a sinner's prayer, and you're done. You're ready to go to heaven. And that was not expected that you would have any other significant spiritual experiences along the way. I mean, you would grow as a Christian, they would say. But for me, for one, even though I did walk down at the retreat to the front of the church and sat on the seat with the secretary and all that, it didn't take for me. After my mom passed away in 65, she was a devout Baptist woman. I elected to just move with my people, the counterculture, youth movements of the 60s, and we were looking into Eastern religions, and we were experimenting with drugs, alcohol, and we were changing the world, we believed, and I still believe we did. And so, as one of those baby boomers, was raised Baptist in the South, my dad had what I call preacher religion, what many people call preacher religion. As long as he liked the pastor, he was faithful. If he got a pastor he didn't care for, he might not attend. After Mother passed away, we didn't attend very much. After that, there were some really wonderful people who would stop by the house and try to get us to come back to the church. But, we'd rather shoot pool, me and my brother-in-law and my dad. And I was just getting into music and so forth. So my first music introductions was not in the church. It was in the pop music realm, and there was no connection there for me between Dizzy Miss Lizzie and Up From the Grave He Arose. There was no connection there for me. because of where I lived, because of when I lived, African American music became very popular. And even the so-called conservative people who went to Myrtle Beach to shag, which was a dance, they were dancing to, for the most part, soul music, which is African American music in the popular culture. And so all of this, the history, the Kennedys, Dr. King, all that history was taking us somewhere. And for me, you know, I started exploring blues, rock, and playing guitar. Uh, and I became, as a person, the guitar became an extension of who I was. And so it's always been real important, not just in my activities, but pretty much my spirituality. And so the Jesus movement hit, um, and my sisters and I, we didn't get saved in a church. We started reading the Bible for ourselves and praying together in a mobile home, my older sister's home. And we decided we were going to, after we gave our heart to the Lord, and we did this pretty much the way we were raised to do it, but we were believing there was more to it. Like, my sister was 9 years older than me. When she started talking to the pastor about the Spirit-filled life, he was like, well, we don't do that. We believe in getting saved and then, rededicating your life. You can rededicate your life about 40 times if you need to. But so she was turned off by that. And so we started reading the Bible for ourselves. We came out of a time when we were experimenting with a lot of drugs and alcohol. And, a lot of that had led to excesses. Pardon me. And so we are becoming to Christ. And there are many, many other thousands of young people that are coming to Christ the same time as we were throughout the United States, actually the world. Renewal movements and revivals, they happen simultaneously worldwide usually. And so there were hippies that were worshiping and outdoors and in communes all across the world in like 69, 70, 72, 73, and so forth. And so we were a genuine part of the Jesus movement. And that movement was very music oriented out in California. Most of the time where there was a group of young people that were coming to God, they usually started these Christian rock bands, and they were recording music, writing songs. There were new hymns. It was a new song. It was not the same old historical hymns, that came down from Isaac Watts and people like that. But it was new hymns that were written by these counterculture people who had come to Jesus Christ. So also characteristic of that movement was to open the Bible and whatever it says, that's what you do. So that my family and I, we did this. We started having foot washing services where we read that in John 13, and we prayed to receive a filling of the Spirit, where we would speak in tongues because we read it in Acts chapter 2. We got olive oil, and started anointing people that were sick, according to James chapter 5, but we never seen that really done in a church in our life. So my sister comes home one day. I think I'm working in a tread rubber mill in North Carolina, and my sister comes home from church on one night, and she says, I found a church that does what we do in a trailer. Well, I told her, I said, you got to be kidding. There's no way, there's no church that exists that does that. But she said, yeah, she had been to the Pentecostal Holiness Church, and she said, everything that we do in here, they do there. And I said, I bet they don't have a rock band. She said, well, the music's louder. It sure is. It's not just the organ and piano. They got drums in there, and they got a bass guitar and electric guitar and all like that. And I said, is it a real church? She said, yeah, it's a genuine church. They call it Pentecostal. We had heard about holy rollers, but in the South, you just get a lot of these derogatory names for people. You don't really know what it means, and you may not even know anybody on the other end of that derogatory term. It's just people think they're cool just to brand people and label them and drive them away. So I went to this Pentecostal church, and the preacher, Tommy Fuqua, preached on Noah going into the ark with the animals and everything, and then God shut the door. And he preached about, if you don't get right with God tonight, you're going to get left behind. And so when I came home, I told my sister, she said, what happened? And I told her that. And I said, it scared me to death. And she said, you needed to be scared to death. And I said, I went down to the altar to pray. And she said, you needed to pray. Because she was, she was a real butt kicker. But anyway, so I became part of the Pentecostal church. I think it came from our origination in the Baptist tradition that you were supposed to be part of a church. We weren't all together these, commune type people. We still had a respect for organized Christianity. So, and the loud music and, the beat of the music and so forth like that was in the Pentecostal church, I would later come to realize through scholars like Walter Hohenweger and others, was due to the fact there's an African American root in Pentecostalism. And this African American root experiences Christianity in a way that is more trans-rational, not irrational, but trans-rational. We know what we're doing. And then the music is transformative. And the Spirit, Holy Spirit, comes down in the church in experiences. Is how you grow, not just sitting up in a room with a study guide and some white man telling you what to believe. So that goes hand in hand, even though white Pentecostal organizations still have not given full standing to African Americans, surely not Native Americans. And so I haven't been officially affiliated. I attend an independent Pentecostal church here in Alabama. Karen Wheaton is my pastor, along with Michael Wood. So I do attend a full gospel church here, but I'm no longer a formal minister in the sense like I was, For the musicians, getting high, things like that, is a natural part of the music, and the music, what I call the occupational hazards of that profession of being a blues rock musician. Alcohol is there in heavy amounts. It does not yield a very positive effect on the quality of the music. But those of us coming out of what Christians call the world, what I'd call just coming out of life, you will integrate yourself into a form of faith that is true to you and true to who you are and what your development is. So for me, the Pentecostal church was that. It was the natural development of me spiritually as I came out of drug abuse and alcoholism and so forth like that. Doesn't mean you're not going to have a lapse later. We preach deliverance, from life control problems and mood altering substances and things. And many people are delivered and spend the whole rest of their life sober. Some have a lapse, but in the Pentecostal church, you're not out if you're down. You can get back up, and often that guy on the bass guitar is one of the nephews that they're praying for. So, especially in the African American church, Pentecostal church, there's a great deal of inclusion. So you get transformed and formed within the community, not out there waiting on Billy Graham to come to town so you can go down and sit with the secretary. So this is not just a folk thing. This is not just folklore. Tupelo, Mississippi is about 40 miles that way, and my wife and I go there about once a week. If you go there, you can go to Elvis Presley's birthplace, and there's a video that they show you of Elvis growing up in the Pentecostal church. And once we learned that, it made perfect sense that must be why we are who we are. As Elvis, even as a young boy, was sneaking onto Beale Street in Memphis to go into the black clubs. And then on Sunday, he was in the Assembly of God church. So that makes perfect sense. And you all also ask why guys like Charlie Daniels, Mark Farner, Alice Cooper, we can really go down the line on this. Why so many rock musicians, when they get straightened up in their sobriety, why they become Christians? And I did not realize until just a couple of weeks ago that about Stevie Ray Vaughan's very specific and definite experience he had in coming out of alcohol. And it's a beautiful story. And there at the end, I don't think he could have continued because, he was bringing the music down at the end of these shows, and he's all but preaching like Bob Dylan did when Bob Dylan came to faith in Christ. There's some documentaries out there of Dylan literally preaching in a rock concert. And so this is just what happens. I started a Pentecostal church in Atlanta in '86 in a warehouse. And one Wednesday night, somebody told me, they said, 2 members of Leonard Skinner were here tonight. Well, they had gone to a PTA meeting and then stopped by the church. And Leonard Skinner has to go to PTA. If you got children, you're going to become a parent, you're going to raise a family, you're going to do things that look really boring and traditional because you care about your children, you care about your family. So I'm that. I'm a Pentecostal Christian. I'm unashamed about it. The reason I don't talk so much on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube about my personal faith is because I have a lot of friends who do not claim any type of affiliation with any Christian faith. And so I'm not going to try to, boss them around. But if anyone asks me a question, I got an answer for you. This is not, it was like my dad said a few years before his death. He said, I guess this Christianity thing is not just a passing phase for you. And I said, I guess not, since I've been an ordained minister for 20 years. So, this is Corky signing out. Thanking you for listening.